Church. Here with you on Good Friday, and I wanted to take a little bit of time to give some reflections on this day that we celebrate and we remember and we participate in the recognition of Jesus' crucifixion. It's a strange day, like it's been strange for the past month and a half, where we're not together celebrating this event. I remember last year we were able to come for a Good Friday service, and that night had an incredible time of worship and just reflection and slowing down to meditate and think about the reality of the cross. But I wanted to offer just a few thoughts and spend a little bit of time thinking about how strange it is that we call this Good Friday. On the surface, we're really comfortable with it. For most of our lives, we have seen the cross and we sing songs about the cross, and so a very normal thing for those of us, especially that grew up in the church. I mean, we have a cross in our auditorium. Most of us, when we walk in, don't get shocked and feel uncomfortable by seeing that image. But if we were in the first century, if anybody said, you are worshiping a crucified God, it would feel like an extremely strange thing. And so I want us to reflect upon and feel the peculiar nature of the fact that you and I, on a day like today, say it's a Good Friday and we're worshiping a man that was crucified. Fleming Rutledge, in her book titled The Crucifixion, starts her book this way, and it's very powerful. She says, Christianity is unique. The world's religions have certain traits in common, but until the gospel of Jesus Christ burst upon the Mediterranean world, no one in the history of human imagination had conceived of such a thing as the worship of a crucified man. I think that points to the strangeness and the peculiarity of Good Friday. That, yes, we share some common teachings with all of religions, that there's some religious impulse that comes out in Christianity itself, but there's something distinctive about it. And the distinctiveness is that we look at a man who was crucified, and we don't see desolation and devastation. What we see is hope. What we see is love exuded in a very clear way. But I think before we rush to that conclusion, before we sit with the beauty of the cross, we need to feel and recognize and experience its uncomfortableness. There's another theologian by the name of Jürgen Moltmann who I think captures at least a certain kind of posture that Christians should have as we engage with the cross. He helps us think about how to not become so comfortable with it that it becomes ordinary and the shock value of it is lost. This is what Moltmann says. Christians who do not have the feeling that they must flee the crucified Christ have probably not yet understood him in a sufficiently radical way. I think Moltmann is correct. If we just are so comfortable with the cross, it's just become to us this ordinary symbol, we've probably missed the radicality of what the cross actually means. In 1 Corinthians, Paul talks about how it's a stumbling block to the Jews, because how in the world could you worship a man who is going to be crucified? Our Messiah is not going to be crucified. And then it's foolishness, he says to the Greeks, because crucifixion is not a word of hope. Crucifixion is not a revelation of a power of the gods. Crucifixion looks like someone is losing. And so it is a strange and uncomfortable thing for us to claim that we worship a crucified man, but not just a crucified man, but a God, the God of the universe, who was crucified. It's interesting because I have a lot of members that will come into my office and we'll have conversations. But I also, on Sundays and on Wednesday nights, kids will run through my office and do what kids do. And sometimes they'll stop, and if I'm in my office, they'll talk to me for a little bit. And what's interesting is the adults that come to my office, they never acknowledge this picture that I have, a picture of Jesus crucified. But a lot of the kids that have come in, and if I'm in there, they'll discuss with me and they'll bring up that picture and they'll point at that picture. And almost all of the kids that have brought up that picture usually note and acknowledge the fact that, ooh, that's ugly. That's disgusting. There's something that's weird, that's uncomfortable to look at. Because they see in that picture what we're supposed to see on the surface. That this is a man who is crucified. It's not some beautiful picture on the surface. It's something ugly and disgusting and kind of makes us want to, as Moltmann said, flee. And I think that's right. That the kids have captured something that probably you and I have become very comfortable with. That on the surface and at an initial look, the cross itself is not a beautiful event. It's an event that should make us feel a bit strange and peculiar and uncomfortable. But when we feel that, the beauty of this being Good Friday is we are also saying that in that first look of something that is disgusting, something that makes us want to flee, something that makes us not want to look, we actually are seeing the most beautiful event and the most beautiful display of love that has ever taken place. There's another theologian by the name of Hans Urs von Balthasar, and I think he captures this really well when he says, being disguised under the disfigurement of an ugly crucifixion and death, the Christ upon the cross is paradoxically the clearest revelation of who God is. I love it because in that quote, he captures that simultaneously in this thing that on the surface does not look anything like beauty is actually revealing to us what God is like. That we can call this Good Friday because this is the Friday where God said, I'm going to put myself on full display. And it's going to be in a way that you cannot expect because you expect God to reveal himself in some mighty, powerful act. Maybe something similar to the Exodus event where he frees his people by opening up the Red Sea. But the clearest revelation of God, where God shows himself most fully, Christians claim in a paradoxical way, is a man hanging on a cross. This is Good Friday because in something that initially looks very sad and very gut-wrenching, actually is a display of who our God is and what our God is like. And to be a Christian and what is distinctive about a Christian is to say that we don't merely follow the all-powerful God, but we follow the all-powerful God who reveals himself and his love fully through dying on the cross for you and for me. And I hope if you're hearing this tonight or today and you're feeling a sense of, yeah, but you don't know who I am. And I know I hear this message of God's love, but I don't think he can truly love me. I want you to take some time on this Good Friday to look at that cross, to reflect on the reality of that cross. That what we see on that cross, as Paul says in Philippians chapter 2, is not merely a God who was willing to become human, which in and of itself is an incredible act. But he was willing to go farther than just becoming human. He was willing to suffer, but he was willing to go beyond just suffering. He was willing to die, but he was willing to go beyond even just dying. As Paul says, he is willing to even die on a cross. And what you should see there is a clear and definitive declaration of God's infinite and unfailing love for you. So yes, we can call this Good Friday, but I hope we don't call it Good Friday because we move away from the surface that we see, the disfigurement and the ugliness and the desolation there. But as we walk through that and we embrace that and we feel that, I hope we also see that we can call this Good Friday because this is the ultimate example and expression of a God who infinitely loves us. National Park Church, I hope that you take some time with your family today to acknowledge and to reflect upon the reality of the cross. And I hope it's the kind of thing that we don't just reflect upon on one day, but it shapes the way in which we imagine living in the world. That we, as Paul and as Jesus himself would say, would become a kind of cruciform people who reflect the self-sacrificial love of God in our everyday lives. National Park Church, I wish we could be together. I wish that we could be celebrating this Good Friday with one another. But know that you are loved and that you are cared about, and that the God of the universe could not express his love any more profoundly than laying his life down on your behalf and on my behalf. Love you guys.